President Biden just announced Uniting for Ukraine, a new program to allow certain Ukrainians to enter the United States under a streamlined process. Watch my video to find out if your relative qualifies and how to apply. Americans with loved ones in Ukraine have been desperate to find a way to get them to the United States, and understandably so. But until the announcement of this program, there were very limited ways to actually get them here. There was only humanitarian parole, the pre-existing visa routes, and the refugee process. This new program is very exciting. It seems like a modified and simplified version of the humanitarian parole process. It should be noted, however, that now that this program exists, the United States has stated that they will no longer accept Ukrainians for humanitarian parole at the Mexican border. You have to apply for it through this program. So who qualifies for the Uniting for Ukraine program? The first and most important requirement is that there be a sponsor. A sponsor is a person who accepts legal responsibility for financially supporting the intending parolee. This person must also have been a resident of Ukraine leading up to the invasion at least and through February 11th, and they must have been displaced also due to the invasion. They must also possess a valid Ukrainian passport or be a child eligible under their parents' passport. And they must clear biographic and biometric security checks. Also, if a person is not a citizen of Ukraine, but they are an immediate relative of a citizen of Ukraine, and they meet all of the other criteria, they are eligible for Uniting Ukraine as well. This would be like, for instance, a Ukrainian family where the father is a citizen of Ukraine, but the mother is a citizen of Poland. We also have some guidance on who is not eligible. Unaccompanied minors are not eligible for this program, and children that are going through the adoption process are also not eligible for Uniting for Ukraine. And while not explicitly excluded under the instructions for the program, I do not believe that people who have other visa routes to the United States will be eligible for Uniting for Ukraine. After all, this is humanitarian parole, and humanitarian parole is not a way to get around already existing visa laws. So if you are an applicant for a fiancé visa or a spousal visa, you may not be eligible for Uniting for Ukraine. But I have personal experience with Ukrainian family-based immigration petitions, and they are granting requests to expedite for those applications. They are granting those requests to expedite if you request it, but they are also pre-screening applications for people affected by the Ukraine situation and evaluating them for requests to expedite without even having to ask. So how do you apply for the Uniting for Ukraine program? The first thing is a sponsor needs to file an affidavit of support. Let's be careful here to make sure that we're filing the proper affidavit of support, because there are two different affidavit of support that are typically used in immigration cases. Uniting for Ukraine applicants should be using the I-134 affidavit of support. This affidavit of support is traditionally used for non-immigrant visas. This means that the requirements for how much money a sponsor has to make and who the sponsor can be are a little bit more liberal, a little bit more open. A sponsor under the I-134 affidavit of support needs to meet 100% of the poverty guidelines. You can check out the poverty guidelines on the USCIS website. What that amount is depends on who the sponsor is and how many dependents they have, and also how many other people that they're intending on sponsoring. Also, sponsors on the I-134 affidavit of support are not required to be citizens of the United States. They are allowed to be permanent residents as well. It looks like USCIS has broadened the scope of people who can sponsor someone under the Uniting for Ukraine program. So specifically under the Uniting for Ukraine program, a sponsor can be a United States citizen, a sponsor can be a legal permanent resident of the United States, a sponsor can be someone who is present in the United States under deferred action. It can basically be anyone that is legally in the United States right now. This affidavit of support is the first thing that should be filed. This affidavit of support is filed before the I-131 application for humanitarian parole. That is a little bit different than regular humanitarian parole. The reason that USCIS is doing it this way is to screen the sponsor to make sure that they're eligible to sponsor someone, and also for security reasons. USCIS has also opened an online portal so that the I-134 affidavit of support can be filed online. This is a new feature, and it is only available to those who are applying under Uniting for Ukraine. I will also put a link to that portal down in the box below. If the I-134 affidavit of support sponsor is deemed eligible to sponsor their Ukrainian beneficiary, the Ukrainian beneficiary will receive an email with instructions on how to log in to My USCIS. My USCIS is an online account that will allow the Ukrainian beneficiary to submit the additional paperwork that they will need to submit in order to go through their background checks to make sure that they are also eligible to receive humanitarian parole. The documents that a Ukrainian beneficiary will need to upload to this website are several. Right now, we know that they will at least need to upload their vaccination status. That's not just for the COVID vaccine, but all of the required vaccines. There will also need to be an attestation of family relationship if you wish to sponsor a Ukrainian beneficiary who is under the age of 18. Once the Ukrainian beneficiary has uploaded all of the information that they need to through My USCIS, USCIS will process that paperwork to make sure that there's no criminal background, to make sure that that person is who they say they are, and to make sure that they qualify for the program. Once USCIS has determined that that Ukrainian beneficiary has met all of the requirements, they will be authorized to travel. This is authorization to travel to a port of entry of the United States so that you can submit your application for humanitarian parole. Humanitarian parole is a temporary status in the United States. It is simply an entry into the United States for a limited period of time during an emergency humanitarian situation. However, those granted access to the United States under humanitarian parole will be eligible to receive Social Security numbers and work authorizations. An application for humanitarian parole is done on Form I-131. An application for humanitarian parole must demonstrate that the reason you need to be paroled into the United States is an emergency humanitarian situation. However, because we know that the United States has created Uniting for Ukraine, we can be pretty sure that they have already determined that the war in Ukraine is an emergent humanitarian situation. This is very exciting news, and I am very glad to see the United States offering some sort of immigration-related relief to those affected by this situation. If you are currently in the United States and you have a loved one that is displaced in Europe due to the conflict in Ukraine, or if you have been displaced due to the war in Ukraine and you have a loved one in the United States, please feel free to reach out to me. I would love to help you start this process. And of course, I plan on making more videos about this topic and other immigration related topics. So if you would like to be notified whenever I post anything new, please like my video and subscribe.